My fiancée publicly humiliated me for my salary while I paid for our wedding, so I called off the wedding and disappeared forever. I'm a 29-year-old guy who truly believed love meant loyalty, shared struggle, and growing together no matter how modest our beginning looked. I gave everything to the idea of us, even when my days blurred into endless shifts and sore muscles at a stable but painfully unglamorous job. Every paycheck felt like a promise. Every overtime hour another brick in the future wedding I pictured so clearly. Soft lights, her smile, our forever beginning in something beautiful I had paid for with quiet pride. "Babe, you don't have to push yourself this hard," she would say, her voice sweet, fingers brushing my arm. Then, almost casually, she'd add, "But you know, Sarah's fiancé just upgraded her ring again. He really knows how to spoil her." It would sting for a second, but I'd force a smile. "We're building slow and meaningful," I'd reply, trying to sound confident. Inside, though, I felt like I was constantly measuring my worth against men I'd never even met. She praised my dedication in private, kissed my forehead when I came home exhausted, told me I was her rock, yet in public, her eyes held this quiet comparison, like she was scanning a menu and wondering if she'd ordered too cheap. I told myself love wasn't about money, that emotional commitment mattered more than flashy lifestyles, that real women appreciated effort over excess. Still, I couldn't ignore the way her tone changed when her wealthy friends called, the way she'd sigh while scrolling through photos of luxury vacations and designer dresses. Our small apartment smelled of reheated food and stress, while her phone glowed with a world I couldn't afford to give her. "Don't take it personally," she'd whisper after a comment about my salary. "I just want the best for our future." And somehow, I twisted that into motivation instead of warning. I was the provider, the planner, the one counting rupees and skipping lunches. She was the dreamer, the vision, the woman I told myself was worth every ounce of exhaustion. I walked that fragile line between love and insecurity, convincing my heart that sacrifice was romance. But something in her eyes that night told me this devotion might soon be tested in ways I wasn't ready for yet. I've always been the one who quietly paid for everything while pretending it didn't bother me. From the venue deposit to the catering advance, my bank app became a daily ritual of anxiety, my thumb hovering over confirmed payment like I was signing pieces of my soul away. I told myself this was just what a devoted fiancé did. Still, every time my balance dropped, a knot tightened in my chest. A silent reminder that I was bleeding financially just to keep her dreams alive. "Why does the hall look so basic?" she said during a walkthrough, tilting her head as if examining something flawed. "It's what we can comfortably afford, and it's beautiful," I replied, trying to sound steady. She laughed, light and airy. "Comfortable is such a small word, don't you think?" Her friends giggled beside her, and the echo of their laughter bounced off the marble walls, amplifying the hollow feeling crawling up my spine. I noticed the way they scanned my clothes, my watch, my car outside. My palms grew damp, the humid air smelling faintly of expensive perfume and quiet judgment. Later that night, she scrolled through Instagram beside me, pausing on another extravagant engagement post. "See, this is what I mean. That's how a real man treats his future wife," she murmured, not even looking at me. "What we have is real too," I said softly, my voice barely rising above the low hum of the ceiling fan. She sighed. "You're so sensitive." "I'm just being honest." Inside, my heart twisted between love and humiliation. I started questioning everything: my clothes, my career, my worth. I replayed her words on loop, wondering if honesty was just a prettier name for contempt. When she wrapped her arm around me that night, I melted, desperate to feel chosen, wanted. Enough the emotional imbalance deepened. I was the silent backbone, the loyal builder. While she floated above reality with expectations, dressed as standards, I felt like I was constantly auditioning for my own fiancé, performing the role of the reliable man she'd someday upgrade from as she drifted to sleep. Her phone face down on the nightstand suddenly buzzed with a message notification. The screen lit up just enough for me to see a preview line from one of her friends. And whatever it said made my stomach drop before I even finished reading it. I didn't mean to look, but the glow from her phone kept pulsing against the dark walls, like it was demanding my attention. The message preview was short, cruel, and impossibly clear. "Girl, if you're settling for that salary, At least make him upgrade before the wedding. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen, the hum of traffic outside suddenly sounding distant and unreal. She rolled over in her sleep, peaceful, while my mind spiraled between anger and heartbreak. I told myself it was just gossip, just her friends being shallow, but the words carved themselves into me anyway. A quiet dread settled in my stomach, heavy and unfamiliar. The next day she acted normal, humming as she fixed her hair in the mirror and kissed my cheek before leaving. "Don't forget the florist payment," she reminded casually. "They want confirmation by tonight." I forced a nod, feeling like my heart was wrapped in wire. At the cafe later, she brought her friends along, their laughter sharp and polished, their eyes quick to assess me. "So, what exactly do you do again?" one of them asked, tilting her head. "He works a stable job," my fiancée answered for me, a tight smile stretching her lips. "Not everyone needs ambition, I guess." The air felt thick, cloyed with perfume and quiet judgment, and I shifted in my seat, suddenly aware of how ordinary I looked beside their designer bags and effortless confidence. I tried to speak, to defend myself, but the words tangled with every doubt she had planted inside me. She didn't stop them. She didn't correct them. She just watched, amused, like my discomfort was entertainment. When her phone buzzed again and she stepped away to answer it, I caught fragments of her hushed words, my name slipping between nervous laughter and the word embarrassing. The way she glanced back at me made my skin go cold, and I realized something had shifted even deeper than before. I'm a 29-year-old guy who never thought I'd feel this small standing beside the woman I planned to marry. The night of the casual dinner came wrapped in soft golden lights and clinking cutlery, the restaurant buzzing with low chatter and the scent of grilled spices drifting through the air. I could feel the stiffness in my shoulders as I sat across from her, watching the way she smiled too brightly whenever the waiter mentioned premium options. "So," she said sweetly, swirling her drink, "tell them what you earn. They keep asking how we're funding this wedding." My throat tightened. "I make enough to take care of us," I replied carefully. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a real sharp one that snapped through the table like broken glass. "Enough, babe, that's cute. You barely make half of what a decent guy our age should." The table went silent for a fraction of a second before awkward chuckles followed, and I felt every pair of eyes flick toward me. The warmth of the candlelight suddenly felt harsh, exposed, as if it was spotlighting every insecurity I'd tried to bury. I stared at my hands, the faint smell of metal from my watch mixing with my own nervous sweat. "You're overreacting," she whispered when she noticed my expression. "I'm just being honest. Don't get so emotional." Emotional. Like dignity was some childish weakness. One of her friends smirked, leaning closer. "She deserves someone who can match her lifestyle, don't you think?" My fiancé shrugged casually. "He tries. That's what matters." I guess each word landed with quiet cruelty, slicing through the devotion I'd wrapped around her for months. I remembered every skipped meal, every extra shift, every rupee saved with a trembling kind of hope, and suddenly the noise around me blurred into a dull roar. I felt like I was drowning in a room full of people who found it entertaining. When we finally stepped outside, the air was cool and damp, the city lights flickering like distant stars. "You made me look bad in there," she said, folding her arms. "I made you look bad," I whispered, my chest aching. Her eyes narrowed, and that familiar cold edge slipped into her voice again. The one that always warned me something worse was coming next. The ride home was silent, thick with tension that settled into my bones like cold rain. The streetlights streaked across the car windows, casting broken shadows across her face, but she didn't look at me once. My chest felt hollow, like the humiliation at that dinner had scooped something vital out of me and left behind only doubt. I kept replaying her laughter, the way her eyes had sparkled when everyone else joined in, and the deeper I sank into memory, the more worthless I felt. "You're acting like a victim," she finally said, her voice flat. I was just joking. "You're too insecure for someone your age." Insecure? That word echoed louder than the engine. "You tore me apart in front of everyone," I murmured, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly. If the truth hurts, maybe fix the problem instead of crying about it. The apartment greeted us with dim light and the stale smell of reheated food. A quiet space that once felt like home, but now felt like a holding cell. She kicked off her heels, scrolling through her phone, already disconnected from the damage she'd caused. I stood there, heart pounding, as she smiled at her screen, typing something with careless ease. I asked, trying to steady my voice. She didn't even glance up. "Relax, it's none of your business." That sentence sliced deeper than any insult at the restaurant. None of your business. From the woman who knew my fears, my childhood scars, my every financial struggle. I walked into the bedroom, the soft fabric of our comforter brushing against my shaking fingers, and tried to slow my breathing as muffled laughter drifted from the living room. The sound felt foreign, like she was sharing joy with someone who wasn't me. Minutes later, she stepped into the doorway, eyes sharp, posture challenging. "You need to toughen up if you want to be my husband," she said. "I can't walk around pretending you're something you're not." Inside, something twisted, anger, shame, heartbreak, all tightening around a breaking point I could feel approaching, but couldn't yet name. I watched her turn away again, her phone lighting up her face with excitement that wasn't meant for me, and the faint buzz of a notification echoed through the room, one that made me realize her humiliation of me might not be just careless jokes anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, every cruel word from her messages echoing inside my skull like a broken alarm I couldn't shut off. Temporary stability. The phrase kept looping, hollowing me out more with every repetition. I realized how naive I'd been, how willingly I'd become a resource instead of a partner, and yet somehow, the sickest part of me still wanted to prove her wrong. The next morning, I dragged myself to work with eyes burning and a chest full of shame. I volunteered for extra shifts before my supervisor even finished asking. "I can handle it," I said quickly, forcing determination into my voice. "I need the overtime." The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, and the smell of dust and machine oil clung to my clothes. But all I could think about was money, how much more I needed to earn to finally feel like I deserved her. When I got home late, exhausted and aching, she barely looked up. "You're finally taking this seriously," she said, lips curling slightly. "Maybe you're starting to understand what I need." "I'm doing this for us," I replied quietly. "For us?" She laughed softly. "No, you're doing this so you don't look pathetic, standing next to me." The words stung, but I swallowed the hurt and nodded anyway. Like agreeing might somehow rewrite the reality she'd already defined. I started skipping meals, redirecting grocery money into the wedding fund, waking up earlier, sleeping less. My body trembled with fatigue, but my mind clung desperately to the idea that if I just tried harder, loved harder, earned harder, I could still save this one night. As I massaged my sore wrists, she glanced at me with irritation. "Don't act so miserable. It's unattractive," she said. "Confidence is what successful men have." I stared at the floor, feeling something inside me stretch too thin. I was sacrificing everything, my health, my pride, my peace, and still it wasn't enough. Her expectations kept rising, her patience shrinking, and for the first time, a dark question crept into my thoughts. What happens when even this isn't enough for her? And the silence she left hanging after that pause told me the answer might be far worse than I was ready to face. I didn't plan to overhear it. I just stopped outside the cafe, exhausted from another double shift, when her voice drifted through the half-open door, sweet and mocking all at once. The smell of roasted coffee and sugar hit me, warm and ordinary, while my world quietly shattered. "Honestly," she said, laughing, "I can't believe I'm still pretending. Imagine marrying someone so financially embarrassing." My lungs froze. I stayed hidden by the frosted glass, every muscle locked as her friends giggled. "He's paying for everything, though," one of them replied. "At least that's useful." "Exactly," she sighed. "That's all he's ever been. A wallet with feelings. A wallet with feelings." I felt the ground tilt, the pavement cold through the soles of my worn shoes, my skin buzzing like it was trying to peel away from my bones. Every memory, the rings, the promises, the nights I stayed up calculating wedding costs, collapsed into something humiliating and cruel. I wasn't just inadequate. I was a punchline when she stepped outside and saw me. Her smile faltered for a second. "You heard that, didn't you?" she asked, tilting her head like I was a child who'd walked in on an adult conversation. "You called me embarrassing," I whispered. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she replied. "If you weren't insecure, it wouldn't hurt." Insecure? As if my entire soul wasn't being dismantled piece by piece. "You don't respect me," I said, voice cracking. She shrugged. Respect is earned. And right now, you're just convenient. The word echoed louder than the city traffic, louder than my heartbeat. I felt small, replaceable, painfully aware of how little I meant to the person I loved most. My vision blurred, tears burning hot. But she just checked her phone. Already drifting away from the wreckage she created, I stood there, hollow and shaking, realizing I had built my entire future on someone who never even saw me as human. And something inside me whispered that, if I stayed, I might not survive what came next. I didn't confront her after that. I didn't cry or beg or demand explanations. I just went quiet. And for the first time in months, my silence wasn't born from fear. It was born from clarity. I started watching her instead of trying to please her, noticing every careless glance, every dismissive shrug, every moment she spoke to me like I was a burden she hadn't finished using yet. The emotional pain didn't disappear, but it sharpened, turning into something colder, steadier. "You're being weird lately," she said one evening, scrolling through her phone as I sat across from her. "Weird how?" I asked, my voice calm, in a way she hadn't heard before. "You're not reacting." "It's unsettling," she muttered, barely looking up. Inside, my chest felt like a locked room. I began collecting quiet proof of everything: the receipts, the bank transfers, the wedding payments that drained my savings. I stared at the numbers late at night, the pale glow of the laptop screen reflecting my tired eyes. And for the first time, I didn't feel pride. I felt rage wrapped in a controlled stillness. Every transaction felt like evidence of how deeply I'd been exploited. She mistook my withdrawal for defeat. "Finally accepting your place?" she teased one morning while sipping coffee, her tone dripping with superiority. "I'm just tired," I replied, keeping my gaze steady. "Good. Maybe humility will make you less embarrassing," she said, smirking. Her words no longer pierced the same way. They stacked themselves quietly into a mental archive of cruelty I was beginning to organize with intention. The air between us grew colder, thicker, as if even the apartment sensed a shift. I stopped initiating affection, stopped apologizing, stopped trying to win a game I'd already lost. At night, I lay beside her, listening to her slow breathing while my mind mapped out every step I'd need to take to free myself without warning her. The fan hummed softly overhead, a dull rhythm that synced with my heart as I stared into the dark. I knew then I couldn't just leave emotionally. If I survived this, it would have to be on my terms, strategic, clean, and final. And as her phone buzzed again with another late-night message, I realized the time for silent preparation was almost over. The day of the wedding felt unreal, like walking into a dream that had quietly rotted from the inside. The venue shimmered with expensive decor I had paid for, white drapes swaying gently in the warm air, fairy lights reflecting off polished floors that echoed with forced laughter and music. Guests smiled, unaware they were celebrating a lie, while my chest thudded with a calm that felt more dangerous than panic ever had. She stood there glowing, adjusting her veil as her friends whispered excitedly around her. "You're so lucky," one of them teased, eyeing me. She smirked. He finally stepped up. I didn't respond. I just watched, the weight of every insult, every message, every humiliation settling into a steady, deliberate resolve. When the music slowed and all attention shifted forward, my heart began pounding louder than the rhythm of the soft violin. I stepped forward slightly, the cool air brushing against my sweating palms, and cleared my throat. The chatter faded. Curious faces turned toward me. "I just want to say a few words before we continue," I said, my voice calm but edged with something sharp. She tilted her head, confused. "This isn't the time for speeches," she muttered under her breath. "It is for this one," I replied. I turned toward the crowd, the scent of roses thick in the air, and felt hundreds of eyes settle on me. "I've paid for every single part of this wedding," I began slowly. "Every deposit, every decoration, every luxury," she said, "I wasn't good enough for." Her smile faltered. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "I'm reminding everyone what love looked like to me," I continued, pulling out my phone, the screen glowing faintly in the dim light, and what betrayal looked like to her. A ripple of murmurs passed through the hall as I took a shaky breath. Her eyes widened, panic seeping through her perfectly painted expression. For the first time, she looked uncertain. almost afraid. "Stop," she whispered urgently. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally telling the truth." The air felt heavy, suspended, as I scrolled to the message thread still burned into my memory, my finger hovering just above the screen. And as I lifted my phone for everyone to see, I realized this moment would change everything. And there would be no way back once I spoke the next words. I held my phone up, my hand steady despite the storm tearing through my chest, and let the screen speak where my voice once trembled. The words glowed under the soft lights: temporary stability, upgrade after the wedding. Wallet with feelings, and the collective gasp that swept through the hall felt colder than any insult she'd ever thrown at me. I could smell the sharp tang of expensive perfume mixed with panic, feel the sudden hush settling over the guests like a heavy fog. "That's private," she snapped, stepping forward, her smile cracking at the edges. "You had no right to show that." "I had every right to show the truth," I replied quietly, my voice carrying more power than anger ever had. Her mother rushed to her side. "This is a misunderstanding," she insisted, eyes darting around the room. "You're reacting emotionally. Emotionally." I let out a breathless, bitter laugh. I paid for this entire illusion while she mocked me behind my back. The whispers turned sharper, slicing through the once celebratory air. I heard someone murmur my name with sympathy. Another guest shook their head in disbelief. The violin stopped playing, leaving only the soft creak of chairs and the eerie echo of my heartbeat. My fiancée's eyes flashed with something ugly, not guilt, but rage, and she leaned close enough for me to smell the bitterness on her breath. "You're ruining everything," she hissed. "Do you know how humiliating this is for me?" "For you," I whispered back. "You turned me into a joke long before today." She tried one last time, her voice suddenly syrupy. "Babe, we can talk about this privately. You're overreacting. You don't want to throw away everything we've built." "Everything we've built." The words almost made me laugh. I stepped back, breaking the circle of guests, feeling the polished floor cool beneath my shoes. "There is no wedding," I said, louder now, every syllable sharpened by truth. "There is no future. Not with someone who sees me as disposable." Her face drained of color, panic finally overtaking arrogance. "You can't just leave," she insisted, reaching out. But I was already moving away, past the stunned faces, past the decorations I'd paid for, past the life I once believed in. The doors loomed ahead of me, tall and silent. And as my hand brushed against the cold metal handle, I felt something shift inside. Not fear, not love, but a dangerous sense of calm. And just as the doors creaked open, letting night air rush in around me, I realized this wasn't just an exit. It was the beginning of my disappearance. I walked out into the cool night air, and for the first time in months, my lungs felt like they could actually fill with oxygen again. The city lights blurred as I kept moving, my footsteps echoing against the pavement like a quiet heartbeat guiding me away from everything that nearly destroyed me. I didn't answer my phone when it started vibrating in my pocket, her name flashing across the screen like a ghost refusing to let go. Instead, I inhaled the scent of rain and asphalt and let the silence settle around me, thick but strangely peaceful. I booked a small room miles away under a different name, somewhere ordinary enough to disappear in, and sat on the edge of the bed as the weight of what I'd done slowly crushed and freed me at the same time. My hands trembled, but my mind felt clear for the first time in a long while. I replayed every moment of humiliation, every sacrifice, every careless word she had thrown at me, and realized how close I had come to losing myself permanently. "You did the right thing," I whispered into the empty room, my own voice sounding unfamiliar yet steady. The fan hummed above, the curtains stirring gently in the night breeze, carrying with them a quiet promise of distance and safety. Days passed without her voice poisoning the air. No insults, no comparisons, no pressure to become someone I wasn't. I started eating again, sleeping again, breathing without feeling like I owed someone my soul. With each sunrise, my reflections slowly shifted from defeated to deliberate, bruised but no longer broken. I wasn't healed yet. I knew that the scars of being called temporary, embarrassing, and convenient still echoed in my chest. But this time, those echoes didn't control me. They reminded me of what I refused to become again. For the first time, life felt quiet in a way that didn't scare me. It felt like space, like possibility. And as I stood by the window watching the sky soften from deep midnight blue to pale gray, I realized that disappearing hadn't been about running away. It had been about finally choosing myself, even if I wasn't sure yet who that new version of me would become.